Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to our HR30 webinar series. We're delighted to have you join us. You'll notice the chat box here on your control panel. If you can't hear me, well, you wouldn't know to tell me in the chat box if you can't hear me. So I'll assume we're good and that everybody can see the screen and hear us as we proceed. My name is Beth Gilley, and I wanted to welcome you to our HR30 webinar series. Today, we have Amber Chamberlain joining us to talk about the popular topic of millennials in the workplace. So we're delighted to have her here, and it looks like we've got a couple people joining us, so I'm going to just drag here for a minute while we've got a couple of other people logging in. So this topic is a terrific one, and it's one that we hear people talk about all the time, so we're excited to chat about this today. And as we go through today, our presentation, please feel free to put any questions that you have in this chat box below on the control panel, and we'll try and get to those, and we'll have a little bit of time at the end to respond to questions as well. So we'll get started then. I wanted to thank Amber for being with us today and sharing your expertise. Our guest presenter, Amber Chamberlain, is a talent and well-being consultant. She's a longtime advocate, teacher, practitioner for employee and talent well-being. Amber is devoted to supporting people and organizations to make well-being principles a part of doing profitable and high-performing business. She's an experienced business operations program and provider manager, as well as clinical supervisor in behavioral health care and quality of life for managed care organizations, employee assistance programs. She has DOT defense experience as well as hospital system settings. So she brings a lot to the table on this topic and has been working in this arena for quite some time. So Amber, welcome, and thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. So I'll turn it over to you at this point. Are you there, Amber? Huh? Can you hear me, Amber? I see you're there. All right.
I'm here now.
Okay. Good. I'm glad you're there because I wasn't prepared to pick it up.
Oh, girl. Pardon me there, guys. And I think I heard was my bio. Okay.
Yeah, you heard your bio, set it up for you. So all you have to do is click right in.
Thank
so
you.
welcome.
And now yeah. Thank you. And
so I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. And Beth, are you advancing my slide?
Sure.
You're going to be able to do that because I don't know that. Let me see if I can do it. Nope. Thank you, Beth. And thank you, everybody, for jumping in on our call today. This HR30 forum, I think, is a very clever space for everybody to take a few minutes, maybe during their lunch period, and have an opportunity to hear some fresh information. And hopefully this is fresh for you. Again, I'm Amber Chamberlain, talent wellbeing consultant, and I do things frequently with Lytle EAP, and so I'm really happy to be here with you all today. So let's get right into what we're talking about. First of all, I have to say, you know, I chuckle every time, and I think Beth does too, every time I say Millennial Mojo Magic. And in this instance that we're talking about briefly today, we're talking about it from the perspective of for your managers, for your leadership teams. We certainly do have a viewpoint that we can do with a general employee population, but for our purposes today, we're targeting managers, and aren't we always targeting leadership? They're in our sights lately. So why the fun name? Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is why not? We deal with so many serious and challenging themes in our business weeks now, and really always have. Why not mindfully make that shift and be a bit lighter? You're going to hear me say things like that because I'm also a mindfulness, organizational mindfulness teacher perspective, so I like to weave that in. And the truth is, from a neuroscience standpoint, from a learner standpoint, people learn better when humor is involved. And we're all thinking, yeah, no kidding. Okay. So, and the other thing I want to point out is certainly diversity and inclusion in general. This is a real mind shift as well, isn't it? Historically, we have not been so socially and humanistically aware at work. We may have been a little more out in our personal lives, but bringing in this the words themselves, diversity, inclusion, they are very much in the social, humanistic fabric that we're seeing, particularly in Europe and in the United States right now, in industrialized countries. We've been more concerned historically, to put this in a frame of reference, and as to why this diversity and inclusion component is sort of refreshing and opportunistic for us. We've been more concerned with legalistic themes. You'll recognize this immediately. Sexual harassment, anti-discrimination, for example. We've really been quite technical around how to protect our employees from one another from that perspective, how to protect our organizations from lawsuits, et cetera, that it's such a refreshing opportunity to take a look at a more humanistic viewpoint. And, you know, we got very good at those legalistic themes, and now it's nice that we move into more what I call subtle arts at work that have a lot of cultural meaning for human beings at work. And certainly you guys are very tagged into workplace culture, and this has a lot to do with it. And now we have a great opportunity to address diversity and inclusion through this rise of millennial workers. I sort of see Millennial Mojo Magic, even though it has that name, it really hits at three keys. It hits at the millennial note, and we know we're going to have, by what is it, everybody knows this, by 2020, 80% of the workplace is going to be millennials. So we really are just putting a spotlight on what we have come to know here and begun to handle that little juggernaut. It's also an opportunity through this lens to address the multi-generational workplace, because we're all in the workplace at every generational cohort right now. It's the busiest generational cohort in the world of work that we've ever seen in terms of multi-gen. And then the other piece, of course, then is weaving in the diversity inclusion component. So I kind of see this as a way to hit all of those components quite nicely and maybe in a fresh way. So let's talk for a minute then at the next slide what really is Millennial Mojo Magic for Managers. Actually, before, I think I should say this back on the first slide, but Beth, you can stay there. So really, what is that workshop, this work all about that we're talking about today? It's raising the awareness of our management teams about what millennials offer that can benefit everyone. It's identifying and addressing their own limiting beliefs and bias that may be hindering leadership effectiveness. Isn't that great? We can start in our work environments and our culture to gently kind of niggle up the biases and beliefs that might be driving some of the behaviors. Well, that's refreshing. And then finally, we're able to help managers figure out how to harness what research tells us about millennials in particular, sort of getting inside that millennial viewpoint. But I wanted to really frame why it is that we are doing this work at all at this point. So let's take a look on this second slide that we have up here. Let's take a look at what approach I in particular use to address inclusion and diversity via the millennial lens. Kind of taking using this millennial opportunity sort of as a portal, as a way of entering in here. And we will break these down later more specifically for you and give you some takeaways to make it valuable to you. And I reminded Beth this morning, if anyone on this call would enjoy to have these slides, please just let Beth know, and she'll send them right over, because there's some takeaway items for you at the end for you to use. So the very first, I think it's helpful if you really understand the approach that we take in this body of work. So the very first component is we look at the multi-generational workforce today and how we begin to navigate within it. And we look at the concept of work and career growth and how that's fostered. And we look at the concept and function of mindset in order to positively influence and direct employees, because we know that we have to attract, engage, and sustain them. All right, so what we know, and that's Carol Dweck's work. So on that component about career growth and how that's fostered, it's a little bit newer, isn't it, to consider, well, whose responsibility is your career? And I'm really talking to you on the phone as a kind of personally, individually as a contributor. I'm also asking you to think about that when you're growing your talent there in your organizations, because measurably, in particular, our millennials are asking that you grow them. And you grow them not just for the work that they do in your organization, but you grow them for their career arc out into the world, whether they're with you or not. They only want to come if they know they're going to be fostered. So the concept of whose responsibility is your career, and do we sit idle until we're promoted? And you know, do we sit and just kind of be contributors and performers until someone notices and we get promoted? Or do we join associations? Do we take courses? Do we network? So it's beginning to introduce those components to your colleagues, to your staff and teams, as a way to self-responsibly grow your career, and for us as managers to really foster that. So those are sort of the components. But before we go ahead, I thought it was also helpful to illustrate why is this so important to your management teams. Now, first of all, we put an enormous amount of pressure on our leaders, rightly so. We ask them to wear a lot of hats. And now we're getting a little more, we know that we ask them to be wonderful technicians. We want them to be good at communication skills, good at technical delivery of their body of work, good at mentoring that technical body of work to their teams and across teams. We know they do that. So we know that managers mentor our teams on the job. They help them grow their careers inside and beyond your organization. They foster a work community that invites belonging and inclusion. They have meaningful and purposeful work for this talented group of folks to do, and they have transparency in terms of their relationships with them, and of course foster trust. All those elements that you're looking at, the mentoring, the growing career, the fostering community and belonging and inclusion, the purposeful work, the trustworthiness and transparency, all those they come dead center, if you will, to the management team, don't they? They all route there. And by the way, that entire list is what, in particular, millennials are looking for in order to want to be attracted to your company, so that you're known for that, to want to sustain their work engagement, in other words, be focused on those tasks and be performers for you and high performers. This is what has been PwC, Deloitte, Gallup, all these folks have measured those as requirements for engagement. And that hits dead square on your management team. So going on to then, Beth, if we will, what Millennial Mojo magic for managers is not. I think this is important to point out. What it is not ageism in disguise. I like to get that right out of the way. If someone brings up, hey, this discussion about talent cohorts, and by the way, please borrow that language. I think it helps when we're not referring to age groups. We're referring to talent in the times in which they are performing. So talent cohorts. So if someone is bringing up issues saying, oh, this just sounds like ageism, you know, millennials do it this way, I as a boomer do it that way, and what on earth are those Xers doing over there, you know, and what about the greatest generation? If someone is bringing it up around ageism, just kindly take a moment to ask a couple questions. Get at really what their concerns are, because my hunch is what you're going to find out is you're going to get some kind of fear. Fear that, hey, the way I do the work and have always done the work is not going to be sufficient anymore, or hey, my work might go away if someone figures out how to do it faster, smarter, more differently that suits the zeitgeist of today. In other words, just investigate that when you hear it, because usually it has to do with fear or concern that you could really answer to in a pretty satisfactory way. What it's also not is another routine multi-generational awareness workshop. You guys already know there are up to 4 generations in the workplace. You already know the attitudes people hold about the differences. If you've not had this primer, by the way, if you've not done a multi-generational workshop primer, please see Beth, because we are more than happy to come out and lay that out for you in probably an hour, hour and a half, and it makes you more ready for the Mojo Magic work as well. What it's also not, it's not another fact-filled interaction with no real-life application. Nobody else, no one here, least of all your management team, needs another big bunch of PowerPoint presentations with no opportunity to practice with each other and to talk out the viewpoints and to share on this content. They don't need to be blasted out with information and be left with it. Facts don't change anyone's thinking, experience does. Facts are the first thing that are easy to ignore. And it's not a me talk, you listen engagement. The work is done in groups, usually no larger than 20, to increase the level of engagement and opportunity to develop it. But I'm finding that I'm starting to do larger groups at times, but it certainly dampens the integrated learning opportunity. But I'm willing to kind of play with that depending on the organization I'm dealing with at the time. And it also, I use a format called thoughtful questions, and that assists your management team with giving them a construct with which they can begin to discuss with one another their beliefs, their experiences, and attributes. So that's what Mojo is not. So we move on now to really, you know, what now it is really all about. So I think it's important to put this whole subject of manager responsibility for inclusion and diversity in context through all their duties and responsibilities. Again, we spoke to it briefly, but I think it's important to be even more specific here to realize that managers have an unprecedented level of responsibility for the delivery into your organization. They have, and let's break it down more specifically to what the research is telling us. They have a significant and unrelenting talent engagement problem. Everybody in this call has already seen that data for the last 5 years or longer. It's a bit unrelenting wholesale, and there are a lot of contributors to that. Unprecedented multi-generations competing needs and requirements. So your managers are having these diverse talent cohort teams, and they're having to figure out how to make that group sing on the same sheet of music. And that's, you know, again, a subtle art. They also have an increasing need to manage global and remote employees. You're seeing the trends now. You have teams, some of you, in different parts of the world. And you certainly are having people who are working out of their home offices or working out of the local Starbucks at times, especially if they're on travel. You have people all over the place. That's a special skill for managers. There's an increased need to know how to manage freelancers and flex talent. More and more of you, if you have not already started doing so, you're going to use 2 or 3 people to fulfill one billet of a 40-hour week. We used to call those, and do we still, FTEs, full-time employees. And that takes, and that manager managing those specialty employees, some of them on contract and not actually engaged in full-time employment, that's a real specialty skill for your managers. And then the high budgetary costs and competition to attract and retain industry-specific roles, specific to IT in particular. The competition is so high. So to attract and retain that talent and to grow them. So it's really important for your management team to be able also to be cultural heroes from the inclusion and diversity story. And this Millennial portal really helps that. So I just wanted to kind of go back to that and be more specific at what your management teams are already facing. So moving then on to the actual slide 6, in terms of now that you have a sense of the overall program and purpose, let's take a closer look at those 3 elements that make up the approach to diversity and inclusion through the lens of millennials. The very first one is a review. So maybe you haven't done that multi-gen discussion in your, you haven't really addressed, well, we do have this breakdown or breakout of this percentage of various generations in our organization. So it gives you a chance to kind of go back and remediate that a little bit. It's a review of the generations in the workplace today, and we take a look at our own biases. What makes it a little bit different is that this is where we use those thoughtful questions for our management team to say, what do we know about these multi-generational talent cohorts? What do we think about them? Where do we get that information? And what may really be true about the multi-generational workplace? Just begins to open up that dialogue. So on slide 7, what you have here, well, actually, let's stay with 6, Beth. So okay. what we're suggesting to managers here is that we want them to be willing to learn, then teach and discuss generational approaches to work in team meetings. We want to help them begin to know how to take that into their teams. We want to call perhaps on generational representatives to give the team feedback about how they approach specific tasks and problems. Nothing like hearing it from the mouth of the people. I'm a Gen Xer. I'd love to tell you about my life and times in the world of work. And from my perspective, how that influenced how I went about doing business. Be willing to openly talk about and dispel common cross-generational beliefs and biases while looking for common ground. Yes, I tend to do it this way, either because of my generational context or my own particular style. But how do you accomplish this kind of goal, Mr. or Mrs. Millennial? Or I don't guess we have a greatest generation person, and we're starting to see the next generation behind the millennials. They're coming on. They are now 19 years old and emerging into the workplace. So it's beginning to show that kind of inquiry into them. And then making a practice to be aware of those generational viewpoints and routinely weaving them into your team meetings. So these are sort of the takeaways for your management teams. And in particular on page 7, you have the thoughtful questions for managers. And I'm going to kind of move quickly through these, and this is where I want you to maybe ask Beth for the slides as we draw up on the half hour. But for instance, the thoughtful questions for managers. What do I know about the differences among generational talent in terms of how they experience the world of work and why? Another question, what could I learn from those differences that may benefit me? And then number 6, how do I want to share them with my team? I'd love it if you guys would just take these kinds of questions back to your own HR teams and talk them through, and maybe make a little bit of a community of practice just around these questions. Slide number 8 is all about the second approach, which is growing a self-responsible work style. And this is really asking managers to do several things, which include set up subject matter and skill mentorship on your teams and within the company. Also routinely talk about the development and growth and goals and interests within the current working subject matter. Don't avoid really talking personally with your colleagues and your teams about, hey, is this what you had hoped it would be? How could we make this better? And how would this help your future career arc? Periodically reflect on how the work continues to match their values, interests, and overall life goals. You're really teaching your teams and your individuals to take responsibility for their careers and enjoy them, really. And then let's go to slide 9, Beth. So the last element, the number 9 are then the thoughtful questions for your managers. Number 3, who may be a good mentor or peer match in my organization for my team members to grow and develop? How can I get that started? Number 5, am I checking in with my team to determine how well their work roles align with their overall interests, values, goals in their lives? So you can see it begins to get your management team thinking. These kinds of things, these thoughtful questions would be really great at a retreat, one of your leadership or management retreats, just to get this dialogue facilitated. And finally, the third component to Millennial Mojo Magic for managers is cultivating a meaningful work mindset. And this comes from the work of Carol Dweck in terms of, and many others that are talking about, it's sort of the mindful mindset, bringing that into your culture. This is where managers decide to engage and cultivate their roles relative to assisting employees with meaning, belonging, and a sense of connection. And people, I did not make that up. Those things are actually things in the universe of your HR reach and in articles and in studies that human beings need to make meaning out of their work now, not just paychecks, but making meaning and paychecks. And considering then connecting your team or employees' work to the greater world of contribution to the company's well-being, to the field, to the subject matter, etc. So you can see how leaders can gain speed there. And finally, the thoughtful questions here on page 11. How does my teamwork reflect the values and mission of our organization? How does the work we do on our team contribute to the company's well-being? How does it reflect the field of work, our subject matter? How can I support my team in finding meaning, belonging, and a sense of connection at our workplace? So that has to do with that, bringing that diversity and inclusion story into your cultural, meaningful work environment. And listen, I think I did skip one, but the cultivating the mindset through those thoughtful questions, yeah, I think I did cover those. How does my team's work reflect the values and missions of our organization? So you see those there too. Okay, I think because we're coming up on the end, we'll flip to the 11th slide. Oh, it's 12. So what I wanted you to see in this time period together is that this is really a diversity inclusion lesson being woven into this approach. It kind of hits at the diversity inclusion story, multi-gen themes, and millennials specifically. This type of program lends itself well to community of practice methodology as well. I feel like I did this mad dash, but I wanted everybody here on the call who took the time to listen to have an opportunity to just get some exposure to it. Are there any questions as we wrap up this very brief HR30 together? Does anybody have a question?
I'm going to unmute people, okay. So you should be able to ask a question as I go through and unmute everyone.
Yeah, if anybody needs to run over or just leave, if you need to leave, leave, and if we're going to run over, I'm happy to stay and answer questions. And by the way, before anybody leaves, if you do wish to investigate this work for yourselves or have us come in as consultants or do this work, because you attended, you'll get a 10% discount on service delivery just because you attended this today with us. Okay, questions?
I think I've unmuted people so that you can ask a question, But please remember at the same time that we can hear all the noise in the background now that you're unmuted.
Yep.
So just a reminder. There's also the chat box at the bottom if you'd prefer to put to write your question in the chat box at the bottom of the control panel. Please feel free to do that. I had one question, Amber. You mentioned as often people have concerns that when they hear about millennials in the workplace and see it often linked to fear. Do you have any thoughts about how to work with other generations who may be fearful about what all this means?
Yes, I do.
Some of the changes
Yeah, that's a terrific question. What you want to do, first of all, for any individual that just brings that up one-off in conversation to you, be willing to ask about that. Where is that coming from, or where asking the individual, where have you seen evidence of that, or is this a general question? Just really suss it out. Be willing to engage it. Most of all, don't be afraid yourself to make inquiry, very kind inquiry, because you very likely will be able to allay an individual's fear. If you are finding that it's sort of popping up in a few different teams or across a few different folks, this is when it would be great to have a brown bag lunch series, kind of, remember those? That, you know, where you put together some slides on multi-gen and really help to broaden the aperture. But no, today it's not likely that your job is going away, that no, we may be able to learn from one another across generations, but no one way, you know, no one generation has this cornered. And so really helping your culture come to grips with, we're going to learn from one another, and that's a really beautiful thing. Sort of beginning to shift the mindset. I hope that begins to get at it. And if you have a specific need around that and you're seeing it come up, another thing Beth and I are more than happy to come out and do with you and to create the opportunity for a discussion and facilitate a group discussion.
Okay, well, it looks like we're at 12:31, so we'll wrap it up. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. You will be getting an email asking for your feedback about the webinar, and we really appreciate your thoughts about it, and we will really work to put your thoughts in action. So please respond to that. We do appreciate it. And thank you, Amber, for bringing your expertise to this discussion about millennials. And we look forward to our next HR30. You'll be getting some information about that.
Sounds good. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy your day. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.